Thank you, Allison. I was just going to say, we're recording this call in case anyone missed it, and the updates are fun but super informative, so helpful to share if you've got folks at your team who you know wanted to be here but couldn't. So I'm going to start sharing some slides. There are three sections that we're going to go over today. First is the pricing changes, so financial review. Then there's going to be some instrument changes, so survey review. And then lastly, some website changes, which is exciting too. At each stage, we'll do a few slides and then open it up to questions and answers. If you don't have questions or comments in the moment, that's okay. You can put them in the chat as well, or you can email the team afterwards if there's something more sensitive or personal you want to ask, or we can have a small conversation on the call. So we'll have a break after each section. I am going to start sharing now. It always worries me because I have too many screens up, but thank you all for being here for our updates. As I just mentioned, we've got three primary topics for our agenda today: membership pricing, instrument updates, and the website teaser. And we're going to start with pricing. So this is important for us and for all of you to be aware of. Obviously, it impacts our entire membership, our community, but it's important for us to lay the groundwork of context for why the pricing changes were necessary and where we're coming from. We started our membership model in the 2018-2019 fiscal year, 2017-2018 fiscal year, FY18. And we've kept the same pricing structure since that time, so more than 6 years. We've increased basically exponentially from our pilot cohort of 8 museums who participated in the IMLS portion to 22 participating institutions, our first year of membership, to 75 and growing right now. So you can see that there's been a lot of increased participation, but also membership, and with that, some increased costs. Notably, our software that you're all very familiar with, both on the survey side and the dashboard side, has increased by 150%. And by that, I mean, it's not 150% of what it was, it's 250% of what it was. It's gone up by more than double. And that's simply because of the total number of users we have, all the dashboards, and the total number of surveys we collect. So there's been a lot of increased costs, which we've had to shoulder over the last few years, and we've been able to do it because of our thriving membership. As most of you are aware, our current structure looks like this. We have 4 tiers that are priced at $1,200, $2,000, $5,500, and $9,000 based on the size of the organization, and that's dictated by operating budget. We've considered different operating budget structures for different types of organizations, and as we expand, we think we're going to continue to need to do this. Zoos and aquariums pose another set of obstacles in terms of how money is spent and how many people come based on operating budgets, so lots of different things to consider. And certainly if you are an organization that doesn't fall neatly into quote unquote science plus or art, we'd be happy to talk to you about like what makes the most sense as far as your type of organization and operating budget. What we want to do is make sure that this is equitable in a sense that people who want to participate can, and that membership is not the thing that deters anyone, knowing that we have to cover our costs. I do want to show this little graph because when we first designed this structure, it was literally just kind of dividing things up and making it perfectly linear, while recognizing that we wanted to include very small museums and that there was a lower limit to the pricing that we could set. So that's how the pricing structure that you all are familiar with came to be. Where we're going from here is a little more complicated, but hopefully in a straightforward way. So what we wanted to do was take the existing 4 tiers and break each of them up into 2 groups, because what we've heard over time is that, an organization, a science museum that has a $3.1 million budget and a $9.9 million budget are very, very different. But we've lumped them together in the medium category for a long time. So trying to split each of those up, and what we did to determine these price points on the new table, the green one on the right, is we reference the AAMD, the Association of Art Museum Directors, and the ASTC, Association of Science Technology Centers, their membership data based on operating budgets for all of the members in those 2 groups, so art and science. And literally just ran frequencies on how people kind of sort themselves in operating budgets. And what you see presented here makes the most sense. There are more museums at the smaller end of the spectrum than there are at the large end, which is why the gradient is basically biased towards the small museums. We want to create opportunities for museums to identify in these operating budget categories and feel like the price point is reasonable for them, for you. The labels in pink are kind of a joke. They were my attempt at figuring out who would go where and how we were thinking about this. But more often than not, tiny, very small, and small, that's where there are a lot of museums that have the opportunity to participate, and we want to make sure it can fit in here. So this is where we're headed, 8 tiers. And as you can see, at no point did any of the prices increase by more than 10%. So on the bottom bullet here, that was our charge to make sure that we were making changes that reflected the membership structure without changing prices so much that it was prohibitive for any existing member to participate. I already said some of those other bullet points, so I'm just going to jump ahead to this final slide on the pricing, which is future considerations. This change will go into effect for all membership renewals and new memberships beginning January 1st of 2024. So just over 6 months from today, anyone whose membership cycle is in there. We want to give advance notice, but in keeping the changes to 10% or less, the graph on the left shows the current pricing situation based on operating budget size. It's really choppy. And then there are huge jumps between the upper new tier and the lower old tier, if you will. And we would like to smooth that out over time, just so it reflects a more even distribution across museums and operating budgets. We don't have a timeline for this. The graph in green is kind of made up. It's my attempt at showing what the smooth structure could or should look like. But we promise to give everyone in the COVES community and considering membership ample time to understand these financial decisions. Again, 6 months at a minimum, ideally 12 months in advance of any future changes. But we're confident with where we're going for January 1st of next year. So that was a lot of words in 8 minutes, but hopefully that got the majority of what I wanted to share across. So again, here is the new structure. I should probably figure out a way to do that graphically, but again, you can see the membership dues and then the budget ranges. So hopefully everyone here can place themselves and see that there's, a little difference, but not too much. So while I'm on this slide and everyone can see the new structure, I wanted to pause and allow you to unmute or utilize the chat if there are questions, thoughts, anything like that you wanted to share.
I'd like to call attention to the chat. As Kate noted, ArtBridge's awards will continue to cover the membership fees for ArtBridge's site.
Yes, thank you very much, Kate. Okay, well, if you've got additional comments or thoughts, okay, Beth, does this change the categories we use for comparisons in the dashboard, or are those based on attendance? That is a great question. So we're going to continue to, for the meantime, for the near term, we're going to continue to use the same 4-category structure for those comparisons. And that's just the way we've been doing it all along. And that does reflect not just the operating budgets, but your attendance patterns as well. So one of the nuances here is that there are some museums that kind of don't fit the norm, even if you are a traditional art museum or a traditional science museum. And we've had to play around with things. We price people based on their operating budget structure, and then we negotiate sample sizes and the size of the museum for comparisons based on attendance patterns. And that's how things are reflected here. Joey, yes, children's museums currently live in Science Plus. When we did a comparison of operating budget structures and basically trying to make sure that like we're like and different we're different, children's museums and science centers really fit together very nicely. Let's see. And Brooke has posted a comment about federal government procurements above 10K require competition or lots more paperwork. know we're in the minority being a federal museum, but food for thought regrowth. Thank you so much. That's perfect for my 9,900 price point at the top tier for now. And maybe we'll just cross that bridge when we come to it. But thank you for pointing that out. That is really helpful. And we will save this chat so we can come back to these thoughts. Okay, wonderful. I'm going to keep going then. Skip ahead. Okay, so now something that's hopefully, I was going to say equally exciting. Something that's probably more exciting than talking about pricing are instrument changes and things that are going to improve our COVES survey and ideally our measurement of the museum visitor experience moving into the next fiscal year. So before I get started with the changes, of course, talking about the rationale and how we make these changes. As many of you know, we have a questions and measures team that helps guide decision making when it comes to the core instrument and some of the more flexible measures on your site-specific instruments. With the questions and measures team, we meet irregularly, but at least once a year to make sure that the core instrument and the survey questions that we're asking our visitors are still what we want to be asking, that they're in alignment with best practice, that we're using updated terms and response categories and things like that. And then we meet on an as-needed basis, in addition to that, to consider new changes, feedback we receive over time, etc. For almost all of the changes that we've discussed at the community level or for the collaboration, we rely on consensus decision making, where if we have strong opposition, we try and have a meeting and figure out what we need to do. But we don't require unanimous approval to move forward because that would slow things down too much. I'm happy to report that for both the pricing that you've already seen and the instrumentation that you're about to see, we basically got unanimous approval. And many of the people who have been voicing ideas or feedback have just said, like, be careful with this, or this is more complicated than it is straightforward. And you'll see that in these slides. But as you know, and as you've come to trust the COVES survey and our standardized system over time, we're trying to make every effort to maintain the validity of the overall instrument, and through that, preserve as much of our old way of measuring as possible for longitudinal comparisons. We always strive to reduce the burden on the visitor, making the core survey as short and sweet as possible while giving all of our sites flexibility to ask questions that really matter for strategic decision making. And of course, building into that minimized core survey is the flexibility for you all to add new questions or different questions based on your needs. So that's how we make decisions, and then some of the decisions that we make probably aren't going to come as a surprise. The first one, we're doing away with the COVID. Many of you have already actually opted out of the COVID questions, and there are different forms of this depending on your survey. Some of you have a block of questions where we asked about perceived health and safety issues before arriving and then how sites address those. Some of you have a 0 to 10 rating about the site's ability to keep guests healthy. Some of you have done unique things that were very specific to basically the situation from a few years ago. This was core in our post-pandemic surveying option, meaning everybody asked it. We're now making it core to not ask it, meaning it will be on no one's survey unless you need it. If your museum, for some reason, still needs data to respond to any COVID-19 or health and safety concerns, we can keep either of these forms of questioning for you. You just need to let us know. So essentially, this is going to be an opt-in instead of an opt-out. Right? It's not core anymore, but you can add it yourself using the format that we've had, which will provide you longitudinal data and the ability to compare over time. So if you have COVID concerns, please do email coves@MOS, and we will make sure it's on your new survey starting July 1st. Second, question order. We in this community have had a lot of good conversations around Net Promoter Score and overall experience rating. We have always had a standardized survey order for many reasons, and we've elaborated those on previous webinars and on our Instrument Explained and some different places. But more and more, it's become important for us to reprioritize some things, including the overall experience rating, which we've talked about being as important, if not more important, than the Net Promoter Score. So the way to do this on the survey is actually to alternate the order of those two questions for every other visitor. So as you go through your surveying process and people are filling out your survey, one group would see the Net Promoter Score question first, and the next group would see the overall experience rating question first. We don't yet know if there's going to be an order effect. We don't expect any kind of bias, but we will be able to test this because of the natural experiment of doing every other and the placement of those. So we can test to see if OER is higher, if it's the first question or in its current order. And the same thing with Net Promoter Score. There's no reason to expect changes to your data, but we just want to be fully transparent about that. And again, thinking about what it's going to do and what we're communicating to our visitors and the question we asked first and foremost on the survey. The rest of the format of those two questions, so the follow-up, you know what, I'm getting ahead of myself. I'll come back to that in just a second. The second thing that's going to change for the core instrument is the randomization of the 0 to 10 rating items. Previously, we had a fixed order, and many of you and many new sites kind of question that order. Why does something come ahead of something else, and so on and so forth? We are just going to institute a randomization so that there's no fixed order, with the core 0 to 10 ratings coming before any site-specific 0 to 10 rating items. That should eliminate any kind of order effect as well, knowing that they're randomized for all respondents. Okay, going back to what I was saying about NPS and OER. What I was going to say is that the same format will hold true. Only one open-ended follow-up will appear for each respondent. All right, that's the way it exists right now. Everybody either gets this, what is the most important reason for the rating you gave, to the Net Promoter Score question or to the OER, not to both. Too many open-ended questions leads to bad survey design. That principle will stay in place even with the alternating OER and NPS as the first question. However, we are going to change the structure of the open-ended questioning to the overall experience rating follow-up. So we're trying to drive understanding both of the poor, fair, good, what we call less than excellent experiences, satisfactory visits, which are the excellent responses, and then of course outstanding visits, things that are above excellent. So in order to do that, based on visitor responses, we're going to change the language to the open-ended follow-up in the following manner. If visitors select poor, fair, or good on the OER question, they'll get a follow-up that says what aspects of today's visit could be improved. If they select excellent, they'll get what is the most important reason for the rating you gave, so no change there. But if they rate outstanding, they'll get what was particularly outstanding about your visit today. There's a couple key points here that I'd like to make. One, this does sort of insinuate that if people had an outstanding experience and wanted to give critical feedback, that we're not asking for it. And that's okay. As we know, no matter what we ask visitors, sometimes they just say what they want anyway. So there's no reason to expect that if people really have critical comments and they rated the experience very highly, they wouldn't give it. But we also know that many of those open-ended comments are short. And what we're trying to really do is understand the things that we do really well and the things that we do not so well, so we can focus on both, right? Focus on the things you're doing well, double down on those, focus on the things you're not doing well and try and fix those, or understand key areas that visitors are talking about in that poor, fair, good area. And of course, thinking about excellent, we see so many times like great visit, love the education, had fun. That's kind of that satisficing aspect. The language here actually came about in conversation with Andy Pekarik, who we've mentioned through the OER and NPS webinar. And really what we're trying to do is better understand people's motivation for rating in the way that they do. Now, having said that, the same argument could be made for Net Promoter Score. Absolutely. We're not going to do that just yet, although we've been talking about, do we need to make changes in the same way? In our analysis of the open-ended comments following Net Promoter Score, trying to understand differences between NPS and OER, as you may remember from that specific webinar, we talked about the specific reasons why someone would be more likely to recommend or less likely to recommend based on a good experience, right? I'm into science, my friends and colleagues are not into science, I'm less likely to recommend, but I had a fantastic time. Or the temporary exhibition I came to see is closing tomorrow, so I can't recommend it. Or I live in California and this museum is in New York, so it's hard for me to recommend to friends. Things of that nature. There are very specific reasons that don't actually have to do with the experience overall that detract from this line of questioning with NPS. Now, having said that, as I mentioned, we are still in discussion around if we need to make changes to that open-ended structure for Net Promoter Score. Finally, almost finally, very close to final, we are going to institute on the closing page of the survey this email address, info@understandingvisitors.org, which comes directly to the COVES team. Currently, it's on the informed consent page at the start of the survey, which is 1, necessary for informed consent, and 2, kind of helpful if people have concerns at the outset of the study. But we recognize that it hasn't been very helpful if people have concerns as they go through our survey and communicating any of that feedback back to us directly. So we're going to put it on the thank you page in case people want to take out their own device or do something else in communicating with us any issues they had. Having said that, we recognize that if they try and click on the link on your devices while you are doing data collection, you either may not have an email client set up or it may come from some kind of default email address that you have. So our effort here is not to link the responses to the visitor. It's basically to address any concerns about the survey, and or the visitor's experience through the surveying process. So we will communicate that back to you all if and when visitors take advantage of it. But quite frankly, we don't know how often, if at all, this will be utilized. I've heard from several of you in considering this proposal that you all give out either comment cards or have a site-specific email address that you provide to visitors if they ask for something at the end of the survey, which I think is a great customer feedback solution. And you should keep doing that if you've been in the practice of doing it, and if you're not, you might want to consider it. Related to that, it is possible for us to exchange the info@understandingvisitors.org email address with something that is site specific, so you can receive this any kind of note that the visitors leave if you want to. But there's 2 important caveats. 1, no PII will be attached, right? This isn't linking the survey to their comment, even if they put it in which case it functions basically like a comment card, where anybody is free to email your site and tell them about their experience, whether it's with the museum visit or with the survey experience, so that you know and possibly can address it. That's up to the visitor. And the second thing is, if you choose to do this, you need to make sure you have capacity to respond to the emails, because otherwise it just kind of ruins our whole evaluative thinking process. We shouldn't ask for information that we're not prepared to respond to. So if you have capacity, if you have an email address that is convenient for this, we can make a site-specific landing page for visitors that says, thank you, your response has been recorded. If you have any issues that you'd like addressed, please email this. All right, and that again is an opt-in. You let us know if you want that. Moving on, we are going to add a simple statement to the top of the demographics page of the survey based on 1, a number of examples from you all, and 2, some of the comments that continue to come up around, why are you asking this? This feels sensitive. This is about me. Why are you asking me this? Because it isn't about the experience directly. And so to kind of cut that off at the head, we're going to add this disclaimer at the top of the demographics page that says, we ask for you and your group's demographic information in order to better understand our audiences and your museum experience. We hope that this is straightforward and also very honest. We consider different phrasing of this line, but what we want to do is make sure visitors know we are actually thinking about just understanding our audiences. That's literally our website URL, right? understandingvisitors.org. But also because we're connecting our audiences with the museum experience. That's how we use the data. So we're being very transparent and hopefully addressing some visitor concerns in the process. So those are all the core changes, and there's 2 additional thoughts that we are considering and kind of offering as site-specific add-ons should you choose. The first is this notion of welcoming or sense of belonging or feeling included. This is a big area of interest for us. I know we've had webinars on this COP talking about the different research studies that are going on and how COVES is very tied to them. There's been some questions about, can we have a core item that asks that now? Is there a placeholder item that we can use now? And the short answer is, it's complicated. Feelings of welcoming and feelings of belonging and sense of inclusion, they're all very different constructs, and the way we measure them is different. And so depending on your site-specific needs, the phrasing that we'd need to use is different, especially before we get to the kind of research suggestions, provided by some of these research studies. So we do have placeholder items on many instruments that sites have been using, but we're not comfortable standardizing it and making it core as a placeholder for everyone just yet. If you know that you want to add something though, please do email us and we can talk about what's most important in the different examples that we have across the community, across the site-specific surveys, if you want to start asking that question in the new year, in the new fiscal year. And the second thing I want to bring up is this really good relationship that we've started with the Humanities and Human Flourishing Project out of the University of Pennsylvania in their constructs of well-being. There are two specifically that have been of interest. One is on empathy, and the second is social connection. Each of these is a 4 or 5 item 1 to 5 rating, which gives you some kind of idea of empathy and social connection during the museum visit. I say that this is optional because although there is sufficient research backing the item development and inclusion on surveys like ours, we are not convinced that this applies equally to all of the museums in our community, and we don't want to make the decision for you about what you need to measure. But if empathy or social connection is something that you've been talking about internally, or you feel like has strategic relevance to your museum, reach out and let us know. We can show you what the questions look like. There will undoubtedly be several museums asking this in the new year, but I wanted to leave it up to sites themselves to choose. So this is, again, this is your choice if you'd like to add this to your survey. Final slide before we open it up to questions about the instrument itself. Again, our focus, in addition to maintaining the validity of the survey instrument and keeping the burden low for all respondents, is having consistency across all sites. So regardless of which budget category you fall in, Science Plus or Art Bridges or anything like that, we want to make sure the surveys are as parallel as possible so that we have the best aggregate data and can inform field-wide conversations. We also want to focus on our translations, trying to move beyond Spanish, but even if we just focus on that, which is a lot across our 70 plus sites, recognizing that all the core questions will be updated in Spanish, but if you have site-specific questions, you should provide the Spanish translations to us because it's impossible for us to keep track of the many moving pieces across this large collaboration. And of course, lastly, the pagination and moderation of length. The better we can do designing a fluid survey for the visitor, the higher our completion rates and the lower the complaint volume, if you will. So we're going to take that into consideration as well. We've done a good job with that in the past, but we're just going to double check our efforts to make sure everything looks good moving into July 1st. And those are the survey changes. I'm actually going to stop sharing here and open it up to, again, questions, comments, thoughts. I see some comments by Allison. Thank you so much.
We'll
Great
be repeating
question.
all this in email, right? Or we
Yes.
have already? Great.
We have not just yet, but we can distill this down because we know there are people who are not on this webinar. And there's a lot here. Okay, so Marjorie, on the dashboard, will these OER open-ended responses be reported separately or together? That's a question that we actually don't know the answer to. In theory, it could work either way. We could consolidate them all and you could filter by OER response. That's easy enough. Or we could keep them separate because that's literally how the variable format will be on the back end. So on a dashboard functionality, either is possible. And I'm not prepared to say which one's best just yet because I don't know.
I think I'm not going to answer this from a measurement perspective, but from a user perspective, if the goal here is to allow us to be able to think about what are the things we should work on for our poor fair goods and what do we want to highlight from our outstandings, then being able to focus on one at a time feels like a better user-centered approach. So I would say from a user perspective, that feels pretty straightforward to me of just keeping the grouping as the questions are asked differently to allow us to do what you're trying to help us to do.
Yeah, that's a great point. Thank you. That's also easier for us, so I like that. And thank you, Beth. We never get emails, but to Alex's point, it's at the start of the survey. So we absolutely can list it on the last page, not as a hyperlink. I mean, if that solves the problem of people trying to click it and then having something weird happen on the data collection device, we can absolutely do that or share Could even be like another QR code somehow that pops up an email. We'll have to think through that. But again, the intention here is to make sure that visitors have a method of communicating back about their survey experience if there are any issues beyond the ones that you communicate to us about, like tech issues and weirdness that we acknowledge happens all the time and we rarely can diagnose ourselves. Something that the visitors kind of feel good about having a way to communicate back. Julie, the dashboard is hopefully going to be seamless. Now, I say that with a small caveat. There's going to be a period of time between the data collection through the end of June and the beginning of July with different surveys where we need to remap variables to the dashboard. But the idea is the dashboard that you have now is the one you'll continue using in the future, because there are very few things that will change about the data structure themselves, right? Randomization and different places in the survey. You can set filters and investigate differences, and we can do that as well at the aggregate level, but your dashboard should remain the same. In order to get it working the same, though, we're probably going to need a little bit of time in early July as responses start coming in to map everything and make sure it looks good. So just be patient with us during that period. We'll still make sure you get your raw data files for any fiscal year reporting or quarterly reporting that you all are doing in a timely manner, and then we'll make sure the dashboards look good as well. Okay, so my charge for this is to synthesize all of that into an email. It's probably a pretty short email, right? Not too long. And yes, raw data files include all past data too. We'll merge those together. I'm going to turn it over to Sarah now to talk about website updates.
I had one last follow-up, and maybe it will be in the email, about the empathy and social connection, I think, were the two buckets of options. And like each of us can choose to opt in. We're going to have you're going to share at that point a starting set of questions and statements, right?
It's not editable. If you opt in, the question is designed. We have factor loadings and a reliability coefficient that has been tested in museums with the hope of providing us, again, with validity evidence that when we say this is the empathy score, it's measuring empathy. So you opt into the full set or you opt into the null set. Cool. If opt out, I guess is a better way to say it. All right, take it away, Sarah. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you. Okay, so we'll spend the rest of the time with what Ryan called new website teaser. So we were hoping that we would have the website up and running even before AAM's annual conference, but websites are fun and not our areas of skill and expertise. So we are showing you some stuff in slides, and maybe I can show you like little bits of the website and the pages that are blank at this moment, because we're going to need your help putting words to pages. But essentially what we are really hoping for is to create a new landing space for us to share more information, not in really long run-on pages, website pages, to find ways for us to connect and have conversation with each other more rather than through Alex, Allison, or Ryan. A bunch, really, for us to find different ways of sharing our own expertise with each other and providing a lot of resources. So if you have data collectors that are turning over, if you need to share information about COVES with others in your institution, there's like specific pieces of information for that. So this is this morning's semi-updated version of the website. And we'd love to have images from your own institutions to include here. Thank you to Mia and Crystal Bridges for offering some as a starting place for us. And then Getty images, I think, for this one that you see. But the primary way we're thinking about setting this up are to have a variety of those big headline menu options that really get into more specific information that help new organizations explore what is COVES, why should you sign up, why does it exist, tell me more about why I need to think about more data other than the data that I have in my head about my own experience and why I shouldn't think that other people have different experiences in my museum than myself. And then really sort of talks, you all sharing, how are you using the system? What is COVES providing your own institutions? And then a lot of detail about what is COVES. When you join COVES, what is this system that you're joining? The Connect is really like two different ways of us getting communications going. So for institutions that want to join, both information about what does joining look like and sign me up, and then ongoing conversations for contact us. We right now receive some emails from colleagues of yours from different institutions that might not have direct access to us or know our emails, that they use the contact form on our website. So really trying to clean all of that up. And then we're also going to have, there should be an additional one, a newsletter. So you all have received a few so far. We're going to try to make that more public and more broad so people understand and are connected to the work that we're doing. So this is one of two big areas of stuff is resources. So there's a bit of information on our website right now about what is the exit survey, a little bit about how we'll support you in training, but we're really hoping to build this out so that new staff, new volunteers who are supporting data collection processes can hop online and have access to this, so you all don't have to remember in which email or which folder on your server did you store all this information. And then we're really hoping to continue through this group of people, provide more resources and more sort of like our continued ongoing understanding of what does the data mean, what is the conversations we're having across the field, figuring out what of that we might want to share more publicly. We think a lot about COVES as being a community and recognizing that each of our institutions have unique attributes, and we want to remain connected with science centers, children's museums, art museums, historic sites when they join us. So really talking about how is COVES tailored to each sector within and across the museum field, and then also who are we collectively and how do we learn together. And then finally, the member area. So this is going to be, we hope, where a lot of our information lives, or like we will embed links in your profile so that you know where your most recent link is for connecting all your tablets to the right COVES survey, or things that are changing come July 1. There's sort of like a one-stop spot for you to find your Dropbox site, find your QR codes, et cetera, et cetera. Then this will also allow us to connect with each other. So the member directory, I know that somebody at the Bell Museum, Holly, you're on my screen, which is why I'm choosing you. There's somebody at the Bell Museum doing something. I will look up who's in the member directory at the Bell Museum, and hopefully that will spur, right, Holly shared something on a call 2 months ago. I'll follow up with her to allow you all to connect more directly with one another rather than saying, hey, Sarah, who at the Bell Museum knows anything about school outreach, or whatever it was. And then all of our meetings will be on here too. So we'll continue inviting you on your calendars and through the newsletter, but it'll also be on here as well. We were hoping that we could sort of live share this at this moment, but there are, as I said, a lot of blank pages. So we thought we'd sort of save you from that. But we are working with the organization helping us move everything over, and we'll be sending out your login and welcome, update your profile, sort of things wander the website hopefully before the end of the month. Allison, Alex, did I miss anything about the website?
No, just to add, if there's anything that you're holding in your head that's like, I really wish they had that on the website, and you haven't shared it with us at any point, please feel free to share now, because this is the time when we're going to be putting a lot of content on there and mining our old emails to put content onto pages. So this is the time.
Yeah, Lauren, your point of OER justification, agreed. Like, I think we will be creating the space that will be for us as members is going to be called the forum space, and it will be similar to what we were trying to do with ASTC's community of practice page, but essentially having discussion streams and a number of things that I know or understand Allison, Alex, Ryan answer often in emails. We'll sort of like create those as items, and then all of these changes that will be having implications for each of you as you go about understanding, okay, now what are the changes to the data? What do I have to tell my colleagues? How do we have these conversations? We can hold those as various discussion pieces. And then we're also hoping to have within the forum, children's museum conversations, art museum conversations, university-based museum discussions. So you can find your sort of fellow similar in whatever attribute you're looking for, sites for particular discussion.
I have a slight clarification on that. Maybe
Yeah.
more a place where you can access like the technical articles and things like that, whether or not you're a person who is kind of active in COVES, because I know we had a lot of kind of pushback from board members and people who weren't, in our community as closely. So I needed to do a lot of pointing at, but showing that it's not just something, I pulled out of a random folder would be helpful to have that backing.
Absolutely. And if there are things that you all, similar to what Lauren just raised, conversations that you've had or have, would like further support around, that is a lot of what those resources, and there's even a sub tab, I think it was on there, called more resources. Like that's what we're really hoping to populate with a lot. And so we're really going to try to have a robust library. So if there are things you want, or you already have additional information that Ryan, Alex, Allison haven't sent you before that you want to share with us, and we'd love to sort of load all of that in. And these are great suggestions around current sites, participating sites. It seems that most recently the map that we have, or maps that we have on our current website, stopped functioning, and so we're working on figuring out how to bring that back. And thanks, Betsy, for by size, not just location. Other thoughts, questions? We know that this has been a lot of information being spoken and at some level visualized for you all, to you all. Other things you're wondering about, thinking about? Okay, I'm going to ask some questions. If you know that you have images that might potentially be able to be used on the COVES website, could you raise your hand and I'll just take a screenshot and I'll follow up with you rather than you having to send them to me from your institution. And this could be, anything with pictures of humans in spaces doing things that we're allowed to use. Awesome, thank you. Awesome. Sweet, thanks. And I'll let Alex and Allison field unrelated questions. So I'm thinking about the website. Yeah. Thanks all.
No easy answers on the group gender age widget, Beth. It's just a slog of recoding, but maybe there's a better way. Just a lot of data to kind of go back to. If there is actually, for anyone looking to use that data, if there are particular time periods that are more important to you, or like, I don't care about the data before this time, but I really need this time, please let me know and I can prioritize that. Sorry, that's a bit of a departure from the website conversation, but
That's the process of manually recoding, correct?
Yep.
Yeah, so giving us a priority list is helpful for that job.
and something else made nicer by the survey transition. I don't know if did Ryan mention that there's going to be a new survey links?
He did not. We should definitely mention that.
Yeah, so part of the survey, adding new questions and sort of changing around randomizations and the survey architecture, it's just going to be a lot easier and be able to clean out a lot of the junk from the existing survey by just making a new copy, cleaning it all up, removing some, sites that aren't participating anymore, old COVID questions, etc. So that means that in the next couple of months, you're going to, well, before around July 1st anyway, you'll get a new survey link. So that's going to be some coordination with data collectors, making sure the right link gets onto your tablets, etc. We'll try to do as much communication about that as possible. Once we actually have the live links, everything about, the way that they work will be the same with the tags, for your site name and for the method. But because we're making a new survey, in Qualtrics, it means there's going to be a new link. So just something to note about that. I'm sure there's going to be some hiccups, but we'll do our best. New links also mean new QR codes. I don't think that there would be any changes with the decline log.
No changes with the decline log, but we will be sending out new tracking sheets. And in the next week and a half, with that, we are going to be asking for any updated attendance. Otherwise, we will continue to use your pre-COVID attendance for that tracking log distribution. But I'll send out an email with more information about any updates to attendance. So now that we are getting back into predictable attendance post-pandemic, knowing that 2020 and 2021 were such funky years, but starting to recalculate that annually. And if we don't have that, we'll just continue to send you the old targets.
And yes, Kate, new links means necessarily also new QR codes, since it's just, QR code is just a link. So that might necessitate some replacing of the QR code on signage and whatnot.
Alex, you said this is starting July 1st. Do you have any idea when we'll get those new links? I won't have time to get them in places.
I will commit to by the end of next week.
Okay, that's great. I think it's, for me personally, at least a week is great. So I appreciate it.
I might be able to get it slightly earlier in the week, but I'm out the rest of this week. So by the end of next week, we'll have those sent out.
And just to tie those things, that Beth's unrelated comment to what I was saying about the survey, because if we're building a new survey, it's much easier for me to build the pre-coding for all of the gender and age stuff in at the beginning, as opposed to going and recoding data that's already been collected. So at a minimum, all those widgets should be nice and happy again when the new survey gets established, July 1.
I'll just go on camera, Alex, and kind of explain why I'm asking. I just kind of wonder, because some of our widgets like ethnicity show the prefer not to say, but the age group one doesn't, and it just calculates percents based on who did choose to say. And I just kind of have this feeling like, is the age data I'm reporting correct? Because I'm not including all adult group members. So you just have this like what there's a couple of them where the prefer not to say, like income, it's like 20% are prefer not to say. I generally just am like, take this with a big grain of salt. But the age one, we take away the prefer not to say, show the percentages there. But I'm just always nervous when I'm presenting that like maybe it's always the youngest person in the group, or maybe it's so if I'm giving, does that make sense?
Almost. I think it's my memory, and it could be a mistake, that the group age data does include prefer not to say, or my intention was always to include the prefer not to say folks. For the straight up respondent age, it's just a box. So prefer not to say is kind of just skipping it. So we've never included that as a separate category, although we could potentially like recode missing data as a prefer not to say thing. Is which one are you referring to? That respondent one or the like group age data?
I mean, look, I could look at like how many of respondents and kind of manually do it myself, but just when I'm sharing that out, like I just know it's huge prefer not to say for income. And so I almost tell people to disregard that because I just don't know who's not saying. Is it the lower end or the higher end? So I say, take this with the big grain of salt. And then with ethnicity too, like I report the prefer not to say as its own percent. I see it both ways, and I'm, maybe it's just a curiosity to explore another time. And maybe if you just look at, do the age distributions on the respondent kind of match generally the age distributions when you look at whole group size? Maybe that's just something like you could tell us.
Sure, yeah.
I mean, I could do it too, but I'm just like, when I produce reports, I'm giving them the dashboard on the regular versus maybe an annual look that I do.
Yeah, I can definitely try to make that more a little bit calmer for you when you're trying to kind of report that out and for everybody, just to make sure it's consistent.
Or if you know, or if other people know, like, is that graph of who reports their ages, who's the survey taker, does that also reflect the full distribution? I just don't want to be reporting inaccurate pictures.
Don't know off the top of my head, but I would love to look at it.
So not urgent, but food for thought.
Yeah.
Well, thanks everyone. I'm seeing that, folks are hopping off, wandering away. Take a bio break before your next meeting. Again, we will send this in a lengthy email. Love, Ryan, from the group about everything that we've covered here, and then we'll also be sharing this, on YouTube if people want to sort of listen to any Q&A instead of reading, or in addition to reading the email. And please send me and all of us anything you would like to see on the website. I'm sort of the one managing all of the changes, and would love to hear what else you'd like to see on there. And we hope to get you all the link to either to the still being edited site really soon, or when it launches. We'll definitely send out a little celebration newsletter in a new format through the new website. Very exciting. So thank you so much, and we'll be in touch soon.